Welcome to the Spiritual Underground Podcast. This is Dan coming to you once again from the wood shop at DTM Enterprises. Tonight we've got Shane here with us. He's going to sit down and be the next guy in line to add his tape to the library. Just totally juiced to have him here. Known Shane for a couple of years now, close to anyways, and really has made a huge impact on my personal recovery as we've become somewhat of a level of brothers that you know, and again, I hate to put anything in any kind of levels or put it on shelves and stuff, but definitely when you meet certain people, you you gel with them at a level that you just know something is up from the beginning. So that's been the way it has been with Shane. So welcome to the show, man. How's it going today?
Going all right, man. Yeah, just happy to be here. Nervous, as usual.
Yeah, it is nervous.
Anytime I get a mic in front of me or a camera, I'm always nervous. So, it is what it is. But I know I'm here for a reason, and that's how I get over it, is to do more of it. So,
yeah. When I don't like sitting and looking at a bunch of faces, I actually am a little bit more nervous like that. Sitting here just with the tape recorder, I had a lot more nerves built up before, but the more and more I do it, the less and less the nerves for this is happening. And I also kind of wonder about if we couldn't maybe start. I have two opportunities to speak this month.
Nice.
Next Tuesday and then the last Wednesday of the month for Donnie's birthday.
Nice.
For Donnie's 13th birthday, I guess. There we did a last name thing. We're going to try not to do last names. I'll clip that out. No big deal.
Yeah.
And man, it's hard not to do because we really don't.
Because we're just talking normal.
At some level,
now.
we don't really honor that. And when you're looking like Donnie who? Oh, yeah, that. So, and I don't know how to get. Is what it is. No big deal. But I get to speak for him. But I was wondering, could I not maybe begin to start miking some of us up when we're speaking? Mm-hmm. And add that to the library too. These actual talks that we make. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that, how kosher that would be with the club or wherever you're at.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely going to think about it, and really, I can play around with recording it all right on set my iPhone down on the podium in front of me.
Right.
And pick it up and record it and see, maybe do a little
story.
testing and see.
Do what you want.
How,
as long as nobody else is in there, you
right.
can, do what you want with your own story.
Yep. Right. So, actually thinking about doing that. Well, you're here to tell your story tonight, so we should probably get rolling on that. I kind of do like the way we just open it up and start talking. I like these things to be a little bit more conversational than
for sure. Instead of just
ready, set, go, blow
right
the whistle,
point,
and you're. I was born on a dark and stormy Wednesday night.
Right.
So let's just think a good way to always start these things anyway is start with your sobriety date, and then I'll just. You go where you're led from there.
All right. My sobriety date is 10/3/16, and very grateful for that day. And that day was the day that I decided that I wanted to tell my own story, and that's why I'm here today, which is pretty cool. I was thinking about that on the way over here because on that day I was on the verge of pulling the trigger and killing myself because I had nowhere else to go in my eyes. And I didn't want to be here anymore because I didn't know about the 12 steps or anything like that, and my pride and my ego was, I can't tell these people that I'm an alcoholic and addict, I couldn't do that, but at the same time, I didn't want to kill myself and then somebody else tell my story and then find out all the lies and everything that I had been doing because I wasn't that person that I was at that moment when I was going to kill myself, So, let's see. I guess I'll go to the very beginning. I was, my birth date is 2/8/77. coming up on 42 years old now. I was almost 40 before I got this thing, but better late than never.
I sometimes find myself looking back and regretting that time, but that journey had to take place in order to get what I have today.
Exactly.
And I would do it all. I would do the same thing over again to get what I have today.
Exactly, because we had to do what we did to get to where we're at today to find what we found. Because what we found is truly amazing. It's what I've been searching for my whole life, which is happiness. That true, genuine happiness, that void in our soul that was empty. It's finally full and overflowing. Love it, man. When I was little, my parents, they drank. I know my dad drank whiskey a lot. You know, always had a cup in his hand. You know, could always smell it. The smell was always around. You know, bourbon. You know, Seagram 7 was his favorite. But I know at a young age I started bearing all these resentments. You know, right off the bat, and I went back and thought about those resentments since then and got rid of all those things. But man, I started really young at resenting my parents. And they were really, really strict, but they were just doing the best they did or could with the teachers that they had and trying to protect me. I can see that now today, you know, but I couldn't see it then by any means, and I just formed resentments. And
you didn't even know what that term meant, probably.
Yeah, I didn't know what it meant, nothing, man, and start building them up at an early age, and I didn't know how to express myself or talk about things like I do today, and I didn't find that out until about 2 years ago, how to do these things that I do today and be vulnerable and put myself out there and things like that. And I just tucked everything inside and thought it'd be okay, but no.
Kept on stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it.
Yeah, and I got real
That's
full.
just what everybody does, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, what else? If you don't have any other tools, what other choice really do you have to do that other than just to like knuckle down and tough it out, right?
Yeah.
Big boys don't cry.
Yep.
You know, man up.
Yep. And I tried
all
that.
the faulty programming that we were served
Yeah.
that just causes us to get sicker and sicker.
And you build up this wall, you know, and you hide behind it. You don't want to come out from behind it, you know. And so living with my parents, you know, until I was 18, 19 years old, came the time. I never did drugs or alcohol or anything before I was 19. Not even smoking a cigarette, nothing, you know. I was pretty
an adult by the time you got
exactly. By the time I got to do these things, because I was so scared of the consequences of what my parents would do if I did do it, you know, as far as that goes. They hardly let me do anything as far as going out to places and things. They were just protecting me. I can see that now, you know. They didn't want me to go down that path.
How'd you do in school, high school?
I did good. I was on the honor roll and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and
cool. Not that I'm surprised at that. I'm just
no. I mean, I did not like school at all.
Most of us are actually pretty intelligent. I mean,
yeah.
Once we apply ourselves.
I was
playing sports or anything like that?
No, I wanted to play football. That was one of my resentments.
Yeah, not getting to play.
Yeah, not getting to play football, man. I wanted to play football so bad, and I really did have a major resentment towards my parents for not letting me play football because I was really good at it.
Yeah, you look like you would be.
I didn't always look like it either.
But you're still solid.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure you were always.
Yeah, and acting
solid.
Fast, and I could take some hits too, and I could run. Man, I could run and catch. I mean, we'd play neighborhood football, and you know, I'd be playing with the guys that play on a football team, and you know, just waylaying them, you know.
Yeah.
And it got back to the football coach actually, and he told me to join the team. He wanted me to join the team, and I was like, I can't. My parents want me. He said, well, lie to them. That's how bad they wanted me on the team. They told me to lie to my parents so I could play.
That's all hard to get away with.
Yeah. That's what I told him. He said, tell me on the chess team. I was like, no, that's not going to work. But, let's see, where was I going with that? So
we were at the 19 or so that you started.
And you know, up until that point, I hadn't done any of those things. I mean, I remember sitting on my grandfather's lap when I was a kid watching the UK play. You know, he was a big UK fan, and he'd be sipping his Pabst Blue Ribbon with, you know, salt on the rim, and he'd give me a sip and things like that. But,
right.
You know, nothing at all. I had no attraction towards it, really. You know, but when I was 19, my dad shot my mom. And that was Labor Day of '96, and my dad said it was an accident. My mom said it wasn't, and my mom spent 6 days in the ICU and pulled through, you know. And then in that time in my life, to be honest, I didn't care if my dad went to jail for the rest of his life, and I didn't care if my mom died or not.
Wow.
That's how bad I resented them, you know. And I don't today, you know, but
right.
Back then I did. And I took that as a free pass to here's my chance to get away with anything now. I can do whatever I want now. Be my own person.
Yeah, y'all done pulled a big stunt, and that freed me up. You can't
to do whatever I want to do. Y'all can't say shit now.
Yeah.
And so I started dabbling with drinking and doing drugs, and joined a gang. That was not fun. I was in the gang life for about a year, and just doing whatever I wanted, and just running that lifestyle of drinking and drugs and fighting and all that stuff, and man, it brings back so many memories when you're talking about this stuff, and feelings and emotions of different times. That the day that my dad did shoot my mom, the night before, I was already starting to dabble with. Once I turned 18, I was already starting to dabble with drinking a little bit and smoking weed and stuff like that, and talking to the gangs and things like that. But I remember the one night my brother had texted me and said another gang was messing with him at his house or apartment, and he said he needs some help, and was messing with his stepdaughter, and wouldn't leave him alone. So I was at a club, and I went in the club and yelled to my friends, and yay, yay, and they all came, and we left and went out to that complex where they were at, and
this is the apartment complex your brother lived in?
Yeah.
How old was the stepdaughter?
She was like 15, something like that. Yeah, and so we go over there and go looking for these guys, and causing all kinds of ruckus, running around there and screaming and yelling, cussing, and I had a gun in my hand tied with a blue bandana around it so I wouldn't lose it that day, and just in case something happened. And something told me, man, I need to get out of there, and I left. And no more than I left, there was like 10 cop cars that showed up, and 3 ghetto birds, helicopters that showed up right after I'd left.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I got out of there. But that next day is when I got the text from my younger brother from my grandparents' house that I need 911, and I need to come home. And I was like, what's going on? He's like, you just need to come to Grandma and Papa's. Okay. So the whole way there, I was thinking, my brother's dead. My older brother's dead. Something happened to him. So I was already thinking about revenge from the moment I left there to go to my grandparents' house. Because as soon as I found out what it was, I was leaving to go do whatever, And I get to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather meets me at the back door. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, there's been a shooting. And I said, what happened? He said, your mom's been shot. And I said, by who? And he said, your dad. I was like, wow. It just hit me. And I was like, man, why, how, all these questions, and they couldn't answer them at the time, and my grandparents took me down to the hospital to see my mom, and she was in ICU, and she could barely talk. And
so she was shot once?
Yeah, just once, but it went in.
I don't want it once, but I mean, I just was curious.
Yeah, no, it was a stub nose 44.
Woo.
It went into her hand, outer hand, into her chest, missed her heart, outer armpit, inner arm, and outer arm.
Wow.
Yeah, one shot. And the story goes. Yeah. It's a long story about that.
One shot, but that's plugging a lot of holes in, a lot of places to leak, and a lot of damage.
Yeah, it was.
For one bullet.
Yeah, it was. That's kind of a long story, and that's not part of my story I'm telling today. But I went and saw her, and she told me that my dad had tried to kill her because she wanted a divorce, and she had told him that day and things like that, and she wanted me to go and get all the guns out of the house, and he's probably going to come after you next and things like that. And I didn't know, I was scared. I didn't know. So I went home and got all the guns out of my house and loaded up the car and took them to my grandfather's house, who my mother had been estranged from for like 6 or 7 years. And I hadn't seen them either. I mean, they wouldn't let us see them, and I took them over there, and I got to see my grandfather again, which was pretty cool, and get to start a relationship up with him again before he passed. But my grandmother had already passed away several years prior, and I was able to go to her funeral, but that's only, my mom didn't even go to her funeral.
Wow.
Because of her resentments.
Yeah.
And
man, that's something you can never get back.
Never. I'm thankful I was able to at least go, say
Yeah.
goodbye, say my goodbyes, and I'm grateful my mother let me do that, So, man. So then, I really started drinking a lot, doing a lot of drugs, different drugs. I was smoking crack. I didn't even know I was smoking crack, but then my friends were putting it into blunts and rolling it up with weed and calling dank blunts. And I didn't know. I hear the popping and stuff like that, and I like, what's that? And they're like, oh, it's just seeds, And that stuff never affected me as far as what affects certain people the way crack does. But I wouldn't even get half the weed smoking that stuff,
Huh.
I didn't get any kind of buzz. I remember the first time I even hit a joint, I never got high. First time I drank, I never got drunk. First time I ever had sex, I didn't finish.
Yeah.
all those first things, but I still did them again anyway. No matter, I didn't get drunk the first time and still drank, again. Didn't get high the first time, but I still smoked again. Wasn't until about 2001 is where I got kind of introduced into pain pills, and that's my DOC. That's what got me to where I am today, in my eyes.
Drug of choice.
Yeah, drug of choice. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Just never know who might be listening.
Right?
If they know
Yeah.
what that is or not.
What's Doc? But so my dad in 2001 was in a wreck. I worked for my family business, and me and my dad worked together, and he had gotten in a wreck, and he had pain pills all the time, Darvocets, in the truck. And I remember the first time I took one, I was at a job site, and I went out to the truck, and I was just experimenting. I didn't know what they do to me or nothing. I just took one, and man, I got a lot of work done that day, and I liked it, and it made me feel good. And I knew from right there that I liked them a lot, and it made me feel good. It made me feel different than the way I'd always felt. Just, it made me feel happy. Filled that void I had. And I always say in the beginning it was fun in the beginning. Well, it was fun in the beginning because it made me feel better than what I had been feeling. Because I'd always felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. And that helped me feel like I fit in. Even though people didn't know I was taking it, but the effects of the pill made me feel like I fit in, not any kind of like peer pressure or anything like that. Like, I think I'm cool because I'm doing it with them. And then I didn't start off at the gates taking a whole bunch of them. It was just one every now and again. And for years it was like that. And then I ended up getting into an automobile accident in 2008. And I had a head-on collision with another car, and I had an icy patch on the road. And I'd actually taken some pain pills that day from my dad and taken them,
Oh, really?
And that freaked me out when I got in the wreck. I was like, oh, my God, if they find out, am I going to get charged for anything or whatever? And luckily, it was, black ice that day, and that's what happened. But I had 7 herniated discs and 3 bulging discs at that time from that accident. And they put me on pain meds. And I didn't even know it happened at first, when the wreck happened. I jumped out of the car. Actually, no, I didn't jump out. I had to climb out the window because I couldn't even open the doors on my Dodge Ram 1500 because the whole front end had smashed so far back,
And the doors jammed shut?
Doors jammed shut. The window busted out. I was actually in the passenger seat.
Oh, were you?
Ended up in the passenger seat. Yeah, it was all slow motion. I remember it like right
No
now.
seatbelts?
No seatbelt. Yeah, knocked me on my boots. That's
Really?
how hard it hit. Yeah, my boots came off. Ended up in the passenger seat, and the window was blown out on that side, and that's how I got out. I climbed out that window and ran over to the car to make sure that the other guy was okay, and his whole front end was pushed up in his lap of his car, I was like, and he was knocked out, and I didn't ever get to see or talk to him, but I know he lived and everything like that. But I didn't go to the hospital immediately until later, and then come to find out, they put me on pain meds right away because I was telling them I was hurting, and then I did my MRI, and that's when I found out all the big stuff, and then they started giving me more pain meds and things like that. And I started doing physical therapy, got all worked out but one, and I did not want to do back surgery because it scared me. I didn't want to end up messed up the rest of my life because of it. So I just kept putting it off, and doing with the pain meds and physical therapy and things like that. And I was taking them as prescribed, but I knew I liked them. I knew I needed them,
Yeah.
But nobody else did. Nobody else knew that I needed them like I needed them. My wife didn't know, nobody, And so I'm still drinking on top of that too, all day, every day, pretty much, not all day. I drank when I got off work, I didn't drink through the day, nothing like that, unless it was the weekends or days off or whatever. Yeah, I drink all day on those days.
Yeah, same here.
Fun.
Yeah.
It was fun to me.
I always kind of prided myself that I didn't drink at work.
Oh, yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily true because I can't say I never did.
Oh, yeah. I can't say I
but that
never
was
did,
not
yeah.
a habit that I developed, was drinking in the morning and being drunk at work. I
Exactly,
didn't do that.
Like on the way home, I'd grab a beer in the work truck on the way back to the shop, something like that. But
And there were certainly times I arrived at work the next morning from last night that I probably would have blown illegal.
Definitely. That was very common.
Yeah.
And most of the time I waked and baked too. I would
me
smoke
too.
on my way to work.
To help get over that.
Yep, that's what I would do to get over that. Yep.
Same thing.
Then, let's see, 2015, I went ahead and had back surgery because I did like 30 epidurals and things like that to try to
Alleviate the pain.
Yeah, try to do anything and everything except surgery. And then
I always had that too. There was I saw enough people around me who had surgeries. My mom was one of them that had surgeries that went bad.
Mm-hmm.
Or not bad really, but they certainly weren't. It didn't look like an attractive solution.
Yeah,
to
it wasn't
me.
the optimum
And
solution.
somehow, I stayed away from that, even though it was on the table a couple times. Of that was we could do some surgery and fix that for you.
Yeah, and it's funny because I went ahead and had that surgery, and the day of the surgery, like after I got done, I felt better than my back, as far as that goes, I felt better than I'd felt in I don't know how long, immediate relief. I was like, oh my God, thank God, and I said, well, maybe I can get off these pills, and things like that. And, so they gave me more pills at that time because I just had surgery and things like that. So I was taking those, and then I ran out real quick, and it's like, oh man. And then that pain came back, but I don't think it was really there. I think I more or less manifested it through my thoughts of my disease. I need these things.
Right, it'll tell you you're hurting.
Yeah, they do. They'll tell you they're hurting, and I really did. I felt pain.
Yeah, nobody could convince me otherwise.
I can feel it could make me cry pain. That kind of pain. It was weird, and so I continued using pain meds, and then around a couple of months after that, my neighbor had asked my wife. She's like, "Shane, have any pain meds?" She said, "Yeah, why?" She said, "Well, I hurt my back, and I needed a couple, and I didn't know if I could borrow a couple. I can get them back to him." And so she called me up and asked me about it. And when I told my wife this story too, I told her, I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna tell you this, but don't think that you had any part of this. This is not your fault by any means." And
you told her this when?
After the fact,
Back then, or
after
sometime.
I got sober. After I got sober, I told her this, because I was telling her this story about how I started to buy them, which was that neighbor. My wife had called and said, "Hey, when you get home, can you give her a couple?" And I was like, "Yeah, I will," And so I got home and I gave her a couple, and she's like, "I'll give them back to you tomorrow." I was like, "Okay." So the next day, sure enough, she brought them back, and it wasn't the same kind. I was like, "Hey, this is what I gave you." So, "Oh yeah, it is. Look here, pillfinder.com," and showed me that they're the same things. I'm like, "Well, okay." Didn't think anything
So
else
they
of
just
it.
didn't visually look like the same thing.
Exactly, but it was the same things.
Right.
You know, hydrocodone 10s, which were my favorites.
Yeah.
Then a couple days later, she asked again, and I gave her some more, and she gave them back. And I started wondering. I was like, I don't think she's, getting a prescription. I don't think she's buying these things. So I was at that point about 4 or 5 days shy of getting my script, because I'd taken a few too many, and because I was getting 180 a month, and I was like 4 or 5 days short, and I didn't want to go through those withdrawals. So that day I was like, "Hey, you buy those things?" She said, "Yeah. Why, you need some?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Well, how many?" And I told her, and she got them for me and had them in the next day. I was like, "All right." And that started, that started the thing where, okay, so at the end of the month, I'll be okay, and that's when I started taking more and more and more and more, and it led down the road to 60 a day.
Man, unreal.
At the end of my madness, I was taking 60 hydrocodone 10s a day, on top of drinking and smoking weed, and so leading up to my sobriety date, a couple weeks prior, these things started happening, these signs. I had tried to quit several times. Like, we'd go on vacation, and that's when I'd always try to do it, because I would be away from being able to get any more. But it always happened that the day of us leaving, my script would be up for, getting filled again. So I would always get it refilled, and I'd have 180. I'm like, all right, I'm going to make this last through the week. I'm going to wing myself off these things, and I'll be good, And sure enough, as soon as I take that first one, I was like, well, the faster I take them, the quicker I can quit. So I would be done with that bottle of 180 in like 2 days. So, yeah. And then I would start with the withdrawals, but they weren't as bad when I was on vacation, because I didn't have all the stress of, I have to do this, I have to do that. It was, I can drink and have fun, kind of deal, and not have too many responsibilities. I was at the lake or the ocean, so I would just drink all day, and I would drink heavily then. And that's when I was kind of realizing, hey, you might be an alcoholic too, because I could drink 30 Bud Lights, in a day, and I could drink vodka on top of that too, especially when I was going through the withdrawals and stuff. I would drink, half a gallon of vodka too.
Wow.
Just a lot. My body, for some reason, has a high tolerance for things. Before I go into that, I want to tell that story. I had a knee swell up on me, and I thought, oh boy, that's water underneath the knee. I could probably get some pain meds out of that,
Yeah.
So I was letting it go a little bit, because it really wasn't bothering me, And so one day it got to the point where my leg swelled pretty good, and got stiff where I couldn't even bend my knee. I was at work that morning. I was working at Nolan Lake for a friend, and I was like, man, I think I need to go to the doctor or the hospital when I get back. So I got back in town that day. I went straight to the doctor. And I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna get some more meds. Yeah. So when I went there, he's like, ooh, you have a staph infection. I was like, what? He's like, you need to go to the hospital. I'm like, oh man. I was like, man, my back's really been bothering me lately, and things like that. And, trying to throw it out there. And he's like, here, he gave me a script of 60. He's like, you need to go straight to the hospital. I was like, okay. So I went by Walgreens and dropped off my prescription. Tried to wait around. They were like, it's gonna be 2 hours. I was like, well, I'll go to the hospital, see what they say, and then I'll pick them up on the way home, And so I go into the hospital, and my temperature was like 104. My leg was swelled up 3 times the size it should be. Yeah, and I wasn't worried about it really. I mean, it wasn't. I knew something was wrong though. I mean, there was red streaks going down my leg and everything, and so they get me in there, and I'm telling them I'm in a lot of pain because I didn't have any pills, and so they started giving me pain pills, and I'm like, this stuff isn't working, and then they finally gave me Dilaudid, and that helped a little bit, take the edge off, and then the next day they're trying to figure out what's going on. They started giving me, they had 2 IVs in me, give me all kinds of fluids for MRSA staph infection, and so they're trying to get it to go down. They couldn't get anything to work, and I'm telling them I'm more pain and more pain, and they got me on the highest dose a lot that they could give me. And every 2 hours, I had to ask for it, of course, but I'd get mad at them. I was like, why can't you just bring it in here every 2 hours, And then they were like, why? I don't. He shouldn't need this much, But I wasn't gonna give up the goat, I wasn't gonna tell nobody. And so then they came in and they wrapped my leg one day, and I was there for 6 days with this. So they wrapped my leg with an ace bandage. The next day, the infectious disease doctor came in. She said, "Who wrapped your leg?" I said, "The ortho." She went out and came back. A little nurse came in. She's like, "Ooh, she's mad." I was like, "What?" They're like, "They shouldn't have done that. That can spread the MRSA."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she came back and said, "You're going in for surgery tonight." And the whole time I was worried about that, because I was like, if I have to have surgery, I'm gonna feel it.
Yeah.
Because the pain stuff that they give you does not cover that, because of my tolerance. I was taking 60 hydrocodone a day at that time.
Yeah.
So I was freaking out. So I was, telling them I was in a lot of pain, just trying to get them to give me anything else that they could give me to numb that pain, that I was going to be feeling. I was trying to see. And so they went in and did surgery that night. And I remember waking up from the surgery, and I said, there it is. And I started crying. I was like, oh, because I could feel everything, man. It was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And I just had to feel it, and I did not want to feel it. It was bawling, man. And they would give me Dilaudid, and it wasn't doing nothing, And it was just taking the edge off of the withdrawals I was going through from not getting my hydrocodone 10s. And so I was there for another day or two, and I was like, I'm ready to go. When can I go home? They're like, well, we can't send you home on this stuff. You gotta we gotta wing you off. I was like, well, I'll stop taking it now. Like, what? I was like, I want to get out of here. Let's go, because I wanted to get what I needed.
I was self-administered.
That way, that makes me feel better. So they stopped giving me everything for 2 days. I had to sit there with nothing, and finally came in and said, yeah. They had somebody come in and teach me how to walk. Not teach me how to walk again, because they had to cut my knee open. They had 14 staples in my leg, and I couldn't walk on it. I wasn't supposed to walk on, drive, nothing, And that day they said I was going home. So that evening, they're like, okay, you can go home. Is your ride here? I said, yeah. I said, well, where are they? I said, it's me. Like, oh, you can't drive? I said, watch me. And I walked out of the hospital. I wasn't supposed to walk. I walked out of the hospital, got in my truck, drove straight to Walgreens, got my prescription, and popped 5 of them immediately. And I felt better immediately. Drove home. My wife and kids were out of town at the time, because they couldn't visit me at the hospital because I was in isolation anyway. So we were already going to be in Birmingham anyway. So I told them to go on and go, because they couldn't see me anyway, and I was going to be okay, And so I got home and took some more pain meds after I got home, and I got a plumbing call, work call. A guy needed a job done, and I needed some money because I knew I was going to need more by tomorrow, and I didn't have any money at the time because I've been off work for 6 days. So I went and did this job, climbed up on a freaking ladder, and cut a pipe and fixed it with 14 staples in my leg.
Wow.
Just walked out of the hospital and just to get some more money to get more pills the next day because I owed my guy a lot, So that's true madness right there. That shows how crazy this disease can make you, to do those things. And I didn't want to leave that part of the story out, because to me, that's just madness. When I look back at it, I was like, look how crazy you were, man. What were you thinking, But I didn't know any better. I didn't have any other way to find relief, So then a few months later is when the things started happening to lead me up to quit. Was I was at a customer friend's house and doing some things for her, and she started saying all these nice things about me and how much she loved me and cared about me and thanked me for all the things I do for her, and how nice I was and honest and things, and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And it was cutting me, man. It felt like somebody's taking an ice pick in my heart, dude.
Yeah.
Every time I tell that story, dude, I feel it, man. Get emotional, dude, because it hurt. And I had to walk away. I had to walk out of that house that day, and I went home and, doped up to make myself feel better.
Yep, bury it.
Yeah, and bury it.
Once again.
And then a week later, I was dope sick as hell. I didn't have any money to get some more, and I needed some more. And I did a big job for a customer of mine, and I called her up, and I knew her really well. I know her; she's like a second mom. Told her I needed a check. She's like, "Well, come by and get it." I was like, "Okay." So when I get there, I was like, "Look, I got the flu. I shouldn't come in." She's like, "Come in." And I sat down and was talking with her, and she was like, "Shane, you shouldn't need this money this quick. What's going on?" I was like, "Oh, we just got back from vacation and, things like that." Just a bullshit story. She saw right through it. But
making stuff up.
yeah, and I was like, people are starting to see differences. They're starting to notice, because my wife would always ask me what's wrong, but I couldn't tell her.
No.
And then the next week, my wife was going upstairs to get one of the kids' piggy banks to check out something inside it. I was like, oh my God, because I would go and steal money out of my kids' piggy banks to pay for my drugs, and I'd put it back, and I hadn't put it back yet, and so they usually had about $500 or $600 in each of their piggy banks, because all the money they got for their birthdays and things like that, we'd put in a piggy bank. They didn't spend their money, we were saving it for them. And so as we're going up there, I'm freaking out, and my wife opens it up. She's like, "Where's the money?" I was like, "Look, work was slow this week. I took it out. I was gonna put it back in. I'll put it back in this Friday. No big deal, right?" She's like, "No."
Yeah.
It's like, "You stole from the kids." I was like, "I didn't steal from the kids." I look back now and see that I was stealing from my kids, dude. Stealing from my kids, man, to pay for my drugs. And she's like, "What is going on with you?" Blah, blah, blah. We're sitting on the bed. I just remember the whole time, inside every ounce of my soul is screaming, "Tell her." I mean, it was so freaking loud, dude. And I was like, it was just like right on the tip of my tongue of saying, I'm an addict, but I couldn't do it, man. Couldn't do it. And I could tell she started to let up a little bit, and I was like, "Oh, I got this. I'll get it under control. I got it. I'll quit tomorrow." Blah blah blah. No. So the next week, she was going to go down to see her mama in Birmingham, and so her, my sister-in-law, my two kids, and my mother-in-law all went down there, and she didn't even invite me to go. She's like, "Why don't you take this weekend off, go to the woods?" She knew I liked to hunt, and she's like, "Why don't you go to the woods?" That was my happy place at that time, Go to the woods, go hunting. You don't have any responsibility, and get your mind right. Something's not right. So as soon as they left, I went to my dope man's house and gave him $1,600 for 200 pills. Got 2 30 packs of Bud Light and some weed, and went back to my house. And then that was Friday evening. The next day, I do vaguely remember this, that my friend called and wanted to know if I wanted to come over and watch the game. They'd pick me up, and I said, "Yeah." I went over, and I remember nodding off over there, and they had said something to me about, "You all right?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm good," and took me home. And then Sunday afternoon, I'm out of everything. All 200 of those pills are gone. Both 30 packs are gone. All the weed's gone. And my kids walk in the door. And when they walked in the door, I looked at them. I was like, "How did you get so big? Where have I been?"
They've really only been gone a week.
Yeah, a weekend. The weekend. But I saw them in a different light at that moment. You know what I mean? It's like, they're so big. They're so old. Where have I been? All this time. They were 6 years old at that time, And it's like, man, I've been a good dad, but no, I haven't. I haven't really been there,
Living in that fog.
Yeah, I've been in a fog. And the fog was starting to lift a little bit at that time, And so the next day, I was like, I'm gonna quit this stuff, And I was dope sick all day, laying on the couch, didn't do nothing. The next day, October 5th, I was dope sick as hell, laying on the couch, and I just literally screamed out as loud as I could, "God help me, please." It's the first time I think I'd ever said an out loud prayer. I said it so loud I scared my dog and ran upstairs.
Yeah.
And a friend had stopped by, and he usually had pain meds. I knew, and I was seeing if I could get 1 or 2 from him, which would barely even do anything.
Right.
Maybe not throw up as much, but he didn't have any, and I almost told him. And then as soon as he left, I called up a buddy that I had taken to the Brook a year prior for heroin. And he'd been a year clean of heroin. And that's how I would try to help myself, was I would help other people that had addictions. You know, I would try to help them out. Is how I'm not that bad, you know. So I called him up and I was like, hey, man, he helped me with my truck, working on my truck not too long ago. And I was like, man, I got a noise on my truck. Is there any way you can come over and look at it? He's like, yeah, man, when I get off work, I'll come over and look at it and we'll get it fixed up. I'm like, all right, cool. I was like, is there any way you can come now? He was like, Shane, what's wrong? I said, I'm addicted to pain meds. And at that moment was the first time I had said it, you know, and I knew it was out there now, you know.
Yeah.
But as soon as I said it, it felt like the weight of the world was lifted off me. Like, okay, this is real, you know, I've said this. And he's like, well, you know, when I get off work, I'll come over and we'll talk to your wife like you helped me with mine. And my wife calls. And I was like, there she is, man. I'm going to talk to her and tell her now. He's like, all right, you do what you got to do, and you call me later. I was like, all right. So I click over, and my wife's like, what's wrong? I was like, I'm sick, baby. She's like, what do you mean you're sick? I was like, I'm really sick. And she thought I had cancer. And she said, is it cancer? I said, no. I'm addicted to pain meds. And she passed out. She passed out at work. I didn't want to tell her at work, but I was like, just, can you come home? You know, and she couldn't. And I told her, and she passes out. And she gets herself together, and she comes home. And in the meantime, I had called two of my guys and told them that I would get them from occasionally that I can't do this anymore. I'm done. I won't be calling you. Y'all probably get calls, so just be prepared. You know?
Right. You're going to be going through my phone, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're going to be doing all that. So my wife got home, and we talked for about 30 minutes. I told her, you know, what I wanted to do. I told her, I was like, hey, I'm going to the Brook to seek out help. Do whatever you got to do to pay the bills, but I got to do me right now. If I don't do me, I'm not going to be here anymore. Because when I was on that couch, I was debating on running upstairs and pulling the trigger. It just ended the whole show, man. I was done. I did not know what to do. And so we're sitting there talking. I was like, I'm going to go. And she's like, well, don't you want to see the kids? The kids were going to be home in like 5 minutes from the bus. I was like, no, I'm done. I want to get there now. I want to go now. You know, I saw that window of opportunity, and I wanted it.
Yeah.
And
closes fast, too,
yeah,
man.
It does.
You didn't know that then.
Not yet.
Well, something did. But
Yeah. So I didn't even pack a bag, man. I jumped in my truck and took off. And on my way there, the third guy I would get him from, the main guy I would always get him from, called me up. Or I called him, and he answered. And he's like, hey, man, I was going to call you. I got 10. I was like, I'm done. I was like, I'm headed to rehab. You won't be hearing from me anymore, man. It's by some calls. So that was a pivotal moment for me, man. Because at first, my body told me, you need those, man. You're so sick right now, you know. And then I thought about it. I was like, if I take these right now, what is that going to do, you know? It's going to take the cravings away right now, but it's going to start over, you know? Because I'd done that so many times. I'd get like 7, 8, 10 days, you know, of feeling good, and then go back at it and like, why'd I do that, you know?
Yeah, knowing that really you're over the hump on that physical side of things, the real bad part, you know,
exactly,
just that weird shit that's telling you need it, but the real sickness is over by that time.
Yeah.
And you know you're going to start it over again as soon as you take some more.
As soon as I take one, yeah, it always happened. Every time I'd get a few days under my belt, I'd take one and right back at it.
But
always.
not this time.
Not this time. I was like, you know what? No, I'm good. You know, and I got to the Brook, and the one I went to, they didn't have any beds, and they called the other one, and they had a bed, and I went over there and checked myself in. And it was funny because I was like, man, I hope I don't see somebody I know in here, you know, blah, blah, blah. As soon as I sit down inside, I saw a girl I knew from high school working in there. I was like, oh, great. Now it's going to be all over Facebook.
Yeah,
and,
she
you know,
worked there.
Yeah, she worked there. Yeah, and I was like, oh, my God. Now it's going to be all over Facebook. Everybody's going to know, you know, because I didn't know how this stuff worked, you know.
Yeah.
And so I get checked in, and the first night I couldn't sleep, you know. Next day I was laid in bed and trying to sleep, and I remember this is one of those, you know, God shot moments for me was I was laying there trying to sleep, and all of a sudden I felt this like leg cocked over me, and I'm like, what the fuck? And I opened my eyes, and I looked to my left, and it's my friend, my dead friend that died a year prior of a heroin overdose, looking me right in my face with a big smile and said, I'm glad you're here, bro.
Wow.
Yeah. Man. Still see him smiling at me. That was a cool moment for me. I knew I was on the right path, doing the right thing. Something's going on here.
Yeah.
You know. And I got up that day and started doing things so I could get out of the room, you know, because they had you on lockdown. You know, you had to eat your everything right there. You couldn't go do anything. So I wanted to get out of my little room or whatever. So they had a little art class that day, and I went in there, and they gave us a piece of paper and told us to draw 4 colors that represented how we felt. So I had a black piece of paper with a white crayon, and I drew a circle with a cross in it, and I left the first little pie area as black as the paper. The second one I actually colored black. The third one I colored black with a little bit of white just to make it like a dark gray. And the next one I did white because I didn't know what else to do. And then I put a little blue dot in the middle. And then the lady started going around asking what the colors mean. And she got to me, and she's like, well, what does that mean? I was like, well, all I see is darkness, you know. I don't see any light. So the first one I was left as dark as the paper. Next one I colored, you know, black, and the next one just a little lighter, and I didn't know what else to do, so I put white. And she said, what's that blue dot? I said, that's my hope today. That's all I had at that time.
Right.
And I started crying, dude, you know. I was like, what is going on? And so I took that painting and I hung it over my bed and kept it there. And my wife called that day, and I went and called her back, and the first thing she said to me was, I fucking hate you. You're a fucking junkie. You only see your kids on supervised visits, and it's fucking over. And my wife never talked to me. Those are her exact words. She never talked to me like that ever, you know. But I knew she was talking out of pain from all the things I've done to her, and she was finding stuff out, you know. And
it was sinking in.
It was sinking in, man.
All the truth was coming to light.
Yeah, for sure. She was finding out all these things on money I owed people and things like that, and
probably putting some of the stories together, like the old stuff about the piggy bank money and other things. And
everything's coming full circle, you know. All everything's coming to light, you know. And I knew she was just talking out of pain at the time, and my higher power said it was going to be okay. You know, I had that feeling over me, and I just let her talk, you know. And I was like, look, I'm going to be an open book with you. I said, whatever you want to know, I'll tell you the truth. But when you ask me, be prepared for, you know, what you hear, because I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. So every day she would call me after that and ask me questions, and I would answer them truthfully, you know. And it's funny, one of the nurses there is a good friend of mine now, and she said, you know, I always knew when you were on the phone that was a big trigger for you, because you would get so upset after you got the phone with your wife, you know. And I would be, but I would hold my composure while I was on the phone with her, but afterwards I would just break down, man. You know, it sucked. And so I was there for 5 days, and they were ready to kick me out. I was like, I'm not ready to go yet, you know. And I thought I was going to be in there a little longer than 5 days, and they decided I could stay till, you know, for 8 days. Another God shot was one morning I woke up in there, and the song "Sooner or Later God Will Cut You Down" by Johnny Cash was a big song for me when I was out in my madness. That, you know, I knew one day all this stuff would be over for me, as far as the crap I was going through, and, you know, it'd be over, you know. And that song meant a lot to me, and I wanted to hear it really bad, and I couldn't remember the damn name of it, you know, at the time. And me and this guy were talking about it, and we're like, he's like, "It's Johnny Cash Black." It's like, yeah, that's it. It's Johnny Cash Black. And we asked
so the name of the song is Black?
So, yes, this is what we thought at the time.
Thought it was.
It thought it was, okay. And the reason I say thought is because it comes full circle in a second.
Okay.
So we're like, it's Johnny Cash Black. So we go to art class and ask them if they play it, and they said no. And so we go to our next class afterwards, and this lady comes in and says, open your book. She just opened a book and said, open up to page 53. I'll never forget the page.
What kind of book was it?
it was some kind of like recovery book, but it was we were gonna read out of it and do something. On the top of the page, it said Johnny Cash Black. And as soon as I saw that, everybody else saw it too, and they'd heard me talk about it.
Part of the text in the book.
Yeah, it's right on. Yeah, it's part of the text.
Not somebody wrote it in there.
Not
like
somebody wrote it. It was directly on top of the page, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, that guy's been talking about that song all day." She's like, "Well, that's kind of weird." I just told y'all to open that page. I didn't know what page we were going to do. I just flipped it open. I thought we'd be good to start here.
Wow.
So we're like, "Can we play that song?" So she starts playing Johnny Cash Black. I was like, "Well, that's not the song." It wasn't the song, but that's what we thought it was, and that's what was on top of that page, and that was so crazy to me. But she ended up playing. We figured out the name, and she ended up playing that song for me. Man, I cried the whole time. Man, it was awesome.
What do you know what song it was?
Sooner or later, Gotta Cut You Down.
That's what it's.
That's the name of the song.
Huh?
Yeah.
I'm not too familiar with.
It's a good one. Yeah, check it out. I like it a lot. It's not one of my recovery songs. There's a couple I have that are like my recovery songs that mean a lot to me because of my recovery.
Yeah.
Day 8 gets there, and by that time, I'd been talking to my wife every day. My friends had been talking to her, family had been talking to her, and I was able to go home. I was able to go back to my home where my wife and kids were and stay there, And I remember when I first got home, it was like walking on eggshells, because all the crap I'd done. Yep. I felt so horrible about everything, but couldn't wait to see them, I missed them so much. And my wife had told my kids that I was on out of town for work on a big plumbing job in Lexington, is what she told them. And I told all the neighbors that too, because everybody's wondering where I was. And I got home, and the first thing I did that night, they told me I needed to go to a meeting. So I went to a meeting that night. I found a meeting that was downtown, and I drove all the way down there. And on the way there, my pain management called to remind me I had an appointment the next day to get my prescription filled. As I'm driving downtown, I pull up next to my dope man.
Oh, yeah.
Out of the blue. He's right there at the corner of a Walgreens. There's a Walgreens right there and a liquor store. All these things are like, here it is. It's right here.
Yeah.
And I didn't go for it, It was like it was trying to call me. And I was like, fuck you, And I went to my first meeting that night. It was an NA meeting, and I don't remember much about it. I just remember walking in and getting a hug. And that was about it, tell my story a little bit. And the next day, I started an IOP class at the Brook, and that's where I met Christopher. And took his class in IOP, and while we were in there, he said, you have to take. Or you have to go to 4 AA meetings a week, or else your insurance does not pay for your IOP, which I don't think is the case. I think that's just what I'd heard.
I thought about that. Yeah, it's probably fact of the matter is if you're not complying with the treatment plan, then insurance won't pay for it. And if the treatment plan is part of that is X many days of or X many meetings, whatever that is, and then yeah, that is a thing hanging over your head.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was like, all right, I'll go to A, because my friend that was a year clear of heroin never went to any meetings, So I was like, if he could do it, I could do it, 'Cause I didn't know what the meetings were, anything, So
and who the hell wants to go to a meeting, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And we're already having to come to this damn place every morning.
Yep. Exactly. So
I mean, exactly how much do I got to do?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I didn't know how this works.
Any length? What do you mean? Nah.
Yeah. So I started going to meetings, and I remember the first meetings I went to that, I was just sitting there, and staring at the clock, staring at the walls, complying, I was all up in my fucking head. And I remember it was Christopher had said something about, y'all need to get sponsors and things like that, and I remember the second day of IOP, I asked him to be my sponsor because I wanted what he had. And he's like, well, I can't do that, because I'm your counselor.
Yeah, conflict of interest.
Yeah, conflict of interest. I can't do that. I was like, okay. So I said, well, who's the best out there? Because I wanted to find the best. And he told me Burns B. So I said, okay, well, I'm asking him tonight to be my sponsor. He said, you're going to go ask Burns to be your sponsor. And I said, yeah. So I went home. I wrote a letter. and I was gonna ask him to be my sponsor that night.
Put in your application.
Yeah, exactly. So uh, I went and did that. I met him that night out in the parking lot, and he had said, "Hey, I've got a lot of sponsees right now. You need to find somebody that can spend a lot of time with you." And he said, "Find somebody and bring them to me, and I'll tell you if they're good or not." It's like, all right. So it was about the 7th AA meeting I was in. I was sitting there, and somebody was reading the promises. I'll never forget it. And all of a sudden, something clicked in my head. It's like, that sounds really, really good. And from that moment on, I started looking every person in the eye that was speaking after that. And that's how I got out of my own head. And everything started sounding good. It was my story. They were telling my story and how they got through it, and it started making sense, man. And that's when it started kicking into gear. So right after that meeting, there was a guy in there, and I'd walked up to him. I was like, "Hey, man, how do you find a sponsor in here?" He said, "Well, at the beginning of the meeting, sometimes I'll ask and say, is anybody willing to sponsor? And we'll raise our hands, like me." And he raised his hand, and he had the same dragon tattoo on his forearm as my dad does from the 70s. And I took that from a sign from my higher power and asked him to be my temporary sponsor at the time.
Was your dad in the military?
No. No. Well, he says, but not on paper. You know what I mean? That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I don't know why, but there's a certain all the tattoos the guys are getting in the last bunch of years, but our dad's generations or whatever, a lot of them they come out military.
Right. Yeah. Tattoos. My dad was a big biker.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you always had some kind of just regular Joes just didn't necessarily have tattoos.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So he said yeah, and he wanted me to meet him at this meeting at Tuesday night. And I said, all right. So I went to that meeting. And when I walk in, he's sitting next to Burns. And Burns sees me, and he looks up, and he points at my temporary sponsor and looks at me and gives me a big thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
So I was like, wow.
Gave him the A-OK.
Yeah. So I asked him to be my permanent sponsor, and started working the 12 steps with him. And I did not do them perfectly. I did the first one perfectly because that's the only one you have to, and that's you're powerless over alcohol in your life and become unmanageable.
Right.
And that was easy for me at the time because I knew my life was unmanageable, and I knew I was powerless over that stuff, man. I knew I could not put none of it in me, or else it was over again. It just starts over and over and over. So I did the steps to the best of my ability at that time with that sponsor, and he helped save my life. And let's see, it was about 60 days in. Working the steps with them. I remember this morning like it was yesterday. I was laying in bed, and my wife rolled over and hugged me and said, "I love you, and I hope this never changes." And that's the first time she had said, "I love you" in 60 days to me.
Yeah.
Through all that crap. And we told each other we love each other a lot all the time, and it was hurting me that I didn't feel that love, at that time because I'd messed up bad, and I didn't know if I was going to get that love back, and I did, and it just felt so great.
It was like they had to put on a layer of insulation thing, because they don't know where you're going with that, man, and they got to do some self-protection.
Yeah, for sure. I totally get it.
It's not that the feelings aren't there anymore,
but
man, they have to go. They go into self-defense mode.
Yeah, because I was a liar, I was a thief, everything. I stole their security.
Yep.
That's when I knew that we were going to be okay, and I, like I said, continued doing the steps, and I was 4 months sober. I finished the 12 steps with my first sponsor, and he had asked me if I wanted to come out to the prison and speak, because he would take a meeting out to the prison and speak.
Yeah,
and
that's very cool.
I said, all right, let's do it, So my first time speaking was at a prison in front of 150 prisoners.
Wow.
Which, man, it was awesome. It really was. And he knew the promises meant a lot to me because every meeting I would go into, I would read the promises. So when we got in there, I was like, hey, man, can I read the promises in here? He's like, well, they do it a little differently here. So we go in there, and they come to the promises, and they start chanting the promises. And, man, it got me so juiced up. I felt like a gladiator going in for the fight, man. It was so freaking awesome. And I look over at him. He's got this big cheese on his face because he knew it.
He knew what you were walking into. Yeah.
Man. He knew it would juice me up, man. It was so freaking cool. And I spoke for 45 minutes in front of 150 prisoners.
Wow, man.
Yeah. Broke in right.
Yeah.
So
well, at least it's it's a captive audience.
Yeah. They really wanted to hear what I had to say.
There is actually people that's generally, at least from what I understand, people that are like that. They actually have signed up to go.
Oh yeah.
They wanted to go. There are people who want recovery,
Yeah,
so it's not like you're getting this. I've spoken at jail where they made people go.
Yeah, they didn't have to.
And these people were like get points. They get to go smoke, and they got to, they got stuff. They got pay.
Right.
Basically for going, so they didn't necessarily want to be there.
Yeah.
That was a little bit more difficult, but it wasn't no crowd, not that kind of number. This is like a dozen or two.
Yeah. And so did that, and I just remember it. I felt so good after that, and being able to tell my story.
Yeah.
And have people come up to me afterwards and thank me for telling my story. Man, that was awesome. I felt so good.
Yeah, it's a super honor, super juicy. It's
yes.
just man, it does a lot for guys.
It does a lot for your soul, man. And
or it does a lot for anybody.
Yeah,
it's a guy, but the gals get the same.
Yeah, they get it too. So let's see. Move on up to about 6 months sober. My wife and I go to Sandusky, Florida for spring break. It was my first sober vacation. And leading up to that, a friend of mine knew I was going down there, and he had a friend that lived down there. So I called that guy up, asked him to be my temporary sponsor while I was in Florida. So I had an actual person in Florida to be my sponsor, and asked him to take me to some meetings.
Yeah.
And got down there, and first day, my wife and I went down to the beach, and we were having a great day, and just enjoying life for the first time, really. On my first sober vacation, just felt like a little kid, man. It was fucking awesome. And my wife and I were set up on the beach, and I looked over at her, and it was a beautiful day, man. It was so beautiful. And I looked over at her. I said, "You remember that blue dot story I told you, that painting I drew in the book?" She said, "Yeah, why?"
From the rehab.
From the rehab, yeah. I said, "Look up." She looked up at the sky. She said, "What?" I said, "That's my hope today."
Yeah, man.
It still touches me every time I tell that story, man. So that day, that guy picked me up and took me to a meeting down there. So I tell my blue dot story there, and when I got done telling, there was about 75 people in that room. About 30 of them were crying after I got done.
Yeah.
I was really emotional at that time, and I was crying the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
And it was really cool. And
the story's so raw at that point too.
Yeah.
So it's so.
Yeah.
I know some of the things that I've had happen, and as I tell them, there's
it loses its power a little bit. Yeah. It still gets me a little emotional, but not like it did that day.
Yeah. It still has power, just not like that raw energy from when it's fresh.
Yeah, and so this guy came up to me during the meeting. I had a Wu-Tang shirt on. I'm a big Wu-Tang fan, and he came up to me and showed me his Wu-Tang tattoo on his arm, and I showed him mine on my neck, and was like, "What?" So after the meeting, we meet up and we talk, and we just became like instant best friends. You know what I mean? Had a common bond, and so I started going to that meeting every morning, and for the whole week. And I remember the second day I was there, I noticed this guy sitting next to me, and then the next day he started sitting next to me. It's a different guy, and we'd start talking, and he's like, "Man, every time you speak, I get goosebumps." I was like, "I call those God shots, man." I was like, "That's cool. That's cool." He he was coming up on 60 days sober. He lived in a homeless shelter, and they were busing him there every morning. And so I was leaving on Sunday, and he was going to get his 60 days on Friday, and or on Saturday. And so Friday, I was like, "Hey, man, I'll be here to get you. You'll get your 60-day token tomorrow." He's like, "Well, tomorrow we won't be here. The bus takes us somewhere else tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, man." So I was like, "Here, man, why don't you take this?" And I gave him my 6-month token, because April Fool's Day was my 6 months, and I gave him my blue token. I was like, "You keep that until you get yours." And we cried, hugged, You know, it was a real cool experience. And so I go back to that meeting the next day, and sure enough, there he is. For some reason, the bus, you know, brought him to that
back,
meeting
yeah.
that day, you know, which was really
Same
cool.
meeting?
Same meeting, yeah. And I was already giving out chips that day. They'd asked me to give out chips, so I got to give him his 60-day token. And I kind of told that little story that I had given him my blue blue token the day before because I thought he wasn't going to be there that day. And we both cried and hugged, and then somebody's like, see, that's what this is about, you know, thinking about the next person. You know, because those chips aren't just for us; they're for everybody. You know, I don't have very many of my chips.
Don't you?
Yeah, I've given almost all of them away. You know,
Through our home group, I have my stack of that trip from 0 to 12 or 11.
Yeah.
Obviously, I have my 1 years, but I have that sits on my dresser in there in my bedroom. Still those stacked up in order.
Yep. And I still have a few of them, not too many, because I've given, like I said, given a lot of them away. Even my 1 year, you know. Man, it's been a hell of a ride so far. So coming up, when I got back from Florida, I talked to my counselor again. I was like, so when are you going to sponsor me? And he was like, why do you want me to sponsor you? He said, don't blow, smoke up my skirt. He's like, tell me why you want me to sponsor you. I was like, man, I've wanted what you got since the day one, you know. You got something different I want. I said, the book you're writing. I said, the second day I was in the brook, you were talking about this book. And I said, in that class that day, I didn't even know what your book was about, nothing, you know. I almost had like tunnel vision, man. I was looking at Christopher and everything was just bright around him, and it was just like tunnel vision where all I could see was his face and his glow around him. I was like, man, there's something about this dude, man. There's something about this book that I need to be a part of. I don't know what it is. And that was the second day in the IOP. Yeah. I had this thought, you know.
The first day I met him, it made an impression on me. It was in a meeting, but he was just sharing like any old Joe would in a meeting. You know, I didn't know anything about his background or anything, but it certainly lit me up right out of the gates also.
Yeah, and I told him about that, and he's like, "Well, why don't you go home and pray about it, and I'll pray about it for a week, and we'll come back and see what the conclusion is." All right, cool. So I did pray on it, and my conclusion was it wasn't right time. And we go back that next Thursday, and I said, Shane, I prayed about it, and it doesn't feel like it's the right time. I said, I'm glad you said that. I said, because I did too, and it doesn't feel right. And I hope you don't think I'm just saying it because you said it, you know what I mean? He said, no, I understand. And so I was like, we'll just try it some other time, you know? So we went on, and I was coming up on my 1 year, and he approached me this time. He's like, are you ready for me to sponsor you? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, this is what I want you to do. And he started to tell me these things about how to switch sponsors, you know. And I was like, oh, hold on, not yet. I was like, I'm coming up on my year. I was like, I want to give my sponsor the honor of giving my 1 year token. But after that day, you're going to be my sponsor from there on. I was like, that's honorable. I like that. Cool. So, I talked to him about what to do on how to tell my sponsor, you know. And so a week or two before my 1 year, my sponsor called me and he needed a ride to get his truck because he was in the shop. I was like, this is a perfect time. We'll be in the truck for like 30 minutes. We'll have some time to talk and, you know, I can tell him, you know. So we're driving to get his truck, and I told him, I was like, hey, man, first off, I just want to tell you I love you so much for what you've done for me, man. You have saved my life, and thank you so much. I said, I'm going to ask somebody else to be my sponsor, and I told him it was Christopher, you know, and I told him that I'm going to do the 12 steps again, and he thought it was fucking awesome. You know, he's like, dude, that is so cool that you're going to do that. And that's how I knew immediately it was a good decision, you know.
Right.
And even if he would have said, you know, what, you know, if he would have got mad about it, I would have known it was a good decision too, you know, because you shouldn't feel like that. You know, you should want the best for everybody, you know, if they want to move on.
Speaker name, and he introduces himself as first and last name on speaker tape, so I figure I can say his also.
Right.
And I guess I think I will. His name is Scott Lee, and he'll pick up a lot of things from him. One of the things he says is he prays that every one of his sponsees outgrow him spiritually.
Yes.
So I mean, when you got a guy and he wants to go learn more from some other teacher, it's really an honor to you. It's actually a compliment to you.
Yeah,
rather than taking on some kind of negative connotation of that. And that would be. It's kind of like it's double edged. It's not double edged. So like if he would have been mad because he was joyous for you, you knew it was the right solution. Had he been mad, you knew it was the right solution.
Yeah.
It is, and I still hope for that every day. That guys would want to go on and learn from other people.
Yeah.
And we also, just because you want to do that too doesn't mean you necessarily have to lose that sponsor either.
Yeah.
You can take like a temporary hiatus from a sponsor and go learn from another and come back to this one if that's what you want to do.
Right.
In a good relationship, a healthy sponsor relationship ought to be able to operate like that.
Yep, exactly.
We don't have to get all wound up in ego about who's sponsoring who.
Exactly. Yeah, because we're all sponsoring each other, really.
Right.
So I'm on 1 year. He gave me my token, and we said a lot of cool things to each other. And he even said,
I was there.
Yeah, you were, and you gave me my own symbol that night. That was really cool too. That you had handcrafted in your wood shop.
Yeah,
that was cool. I still got that hanging on my mantle, or not hanging, sitting on my mantle. And so then, no, that wasn't my own symbol. That was
the cookies with the one on them, and it probably has the ohm symbol on the backside of it.
Yes,
the coin looking thing out of wood.
Yep. You gave me the ohm right before my second. That's what it was. Yeah. So he even said that night, he's like, you know what? And Shane is now switching sponsors, and I understand Christopher's going to be a sponsor.
Right.
And it was really cool the way he said that too. It was awesome.
All above board, no negative energy whatsoever. It was actually a joy. Like I said, it was a celebration thing rather than
it was cool shit. Like the passing of the guard. It was really cool, man. And so I started doing the steps with Christopher, and I couldn't wait to do them with him, man. Start reading his book, and working the steps through his book, and 12 Steps Spiritual Recovery. And my life is become a lot better. Did a very thorough 4th and 5th step. All the steps, really. I mean, very thoroughly. He broke it down methodically, and broke it down in layman's terms where anybody could do it, man. Because I'm not a very smart dude, in my opinion.
You are, but I get what you mean. It simplifies it, and but at the same time, at the same time you say that though, it also there's an element of heightened difficulty, so to speak. Maybe it's deeper. Let's say that it's got more depth in it than so. Even though it's a simplified way of doing it, it certainly is digs a lot deeper. At least it did for me.
Yeah, for me too. Yeah, I've found out all kinds of stuff about myself, and I dug up a lot of crap that I'd buried and that I'd totally forgotten about. And was able. He taught me how to get rid of that crap, and
is how much juice do you want to wring out of the steps, and that particular way is a optimized, one of the optimized ways to wring as much juice out of the work as you can possibly get.
For sure. I know you've worked him several times through his book as well, and I've watched that progress too. It's amazing to watch you grow.
And then turn around and be able to deliver it to somebody else because, I thought I was special. I would get it because that's just who I am.
Yeah.
But then when I deliver it to other people from various walks of life, from guys who were really successful to begin with to a guy who was homeless, same results on both people, and other ones in between too. So, it's we have a toolbox. There's a valuable toolbox, absolutely.
For sure. And to be able to watch your people you affect, teach them the way you were taught, and to watch, I get to watch my sponsees change right in front of my eyes, teach them the way I was taught.
Right.
And man, that's amazing. The other day, as a matter of fact, I had one former sponsee speak before me, and I was to come up after him, and that was the first time I was like wow, how do I say something better than that? You know what I mean? That feeling that you get as a sponsee talking after your sponsor or somebody you really admire, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how do I top that, you know?
Yeah.
Not that you're trying to top somebody, but like, how do you speak after somebody like that just spoke?
Yeah.
And that was one of my former sponsees that spoke. I was like, man, that was awesome. I even told him that afterwards, and he's like, he almost came to tears. You know, it was cool. He's like, man, don't tell me that.
Yeah.
And that was a cool pivotal moment for me too, man, to watch that growth too. You know. Another guy, he's only got just a little over 100 days now, and he just made his second amends on Friday to his girlfriend, and it went awesome. And he called me afterwards and told me all the juice. It was just a really cool moment for him, and he's on fire, dude.
That's another thing that's happening too. You know, is you're watching people really get a lot of growth in a really short amount of time. I mean, you're talking about, within, let's just say we'll cut it to that inside of 6 months, and even short of that.
Yeah.
I had a couple guys getting 90 the other night. Picked up 90-day chip, and one of them is going to do a fifth step tomorrow night.
Nice.
And so you just watching that transformation happening
so quick.
Really quickly. Getting a lot of traction in their life and a lot of and. I didn't get that kind of traction because I was around for a little bit before this time around. Went back out and stuff, but I never got what That's where I compare the two things to now is what happened to me then. Now I know that wasn't all that fault. Maybe some of that was most of that was me and putting down the tools because the tools work if you work them. It doesn't make any difference.
Yep.
But I see there is certainly a big difference in what I see going on around us today compared to what I'm seeing in some other places. And I certainly don't mean to knock any of that. That's not my point. You know that. And hopefully all the audience understands that too. But this optimized way of doing this work is getting guys, they're getting this
happiness a lot quicker.
Yeah, they're getting that happy, joyous, and free.
Yeah.
Inside of 6 months' time, and they're actually free, getting the steps worked and being, completely transformed men.
Yeah.
In under 6 months.
Yep.
That's what happened to me too.
Yeah.
I'd worked my steps in about 5 months, 4 or 5 months. I always say that thing. If I'd known I was going to be telling these stories, I'd have kept better track.
Right. I know that. Yeah, I was.
I actually keep track of my guys now. I actually do in my calendar and my phone.
Right.
I know when we did the first step, when I first met with them, when we first started, when we did a third step, when we did a fourth step, when we did a fifth step, and I keep some notes, to
cool.
and then when we hit page 164 in the book kind of thing.
Right.
I don't really measure amends because that's a little bit of an intangible, what that is certainly part of that higher power stuff of when you get to do all those, I don't know. To say a guy's done all of his amends would be a stretch.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I keep track of my guys today because I wished I'd have kept track of me.
Yeah, me too. I know.
Yeah, and I can give that to these guys later on.
Exactly,
it's like proof, so that way they can say when they're working with a new guy, here's what happened to me, and here's the timeline where I'm a little, my timeline was a little foggy.
Yeah.
Was, I because I was on home incarceration and I knew some other things about some timelines. I can kind of halfway piece that together and know about when that was, but not that that really matters, but my point there is that guys are wandering around thinking they're going to have to spend, they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? It just seems too far down the road. And when you can put some tangible thing on there and like basically a guarantee, hey, you do what I say, you walk this path the way that we have it prescribed here, and you'll be a free man in 4 or 5 months.
Yep.
And total most of that's up to you and how hard you want to work.
Yep. It is.
Because I won't hold you back. I will let you fly.
Do what you want.
Yeah, we won't work on 4-step every night. We'll do that.
Yeah. And it's funny you were talking about dates. I remember when I finished the 12. You never finished them, but when I stepped out with my sponsor, it was,
I always say my trip through.
There you go. Your trip through January 29th of 17 was when I finished the 12 steps with my sponsor, and ironically. That was the same date that I lost my virginity. Was January 29th. And not the same year, but years prior. But
you sure?
Yeah. I thought that was ironic, though. That
Yeah, I'm surprised you can remember that. I wouldn't. That's another one of them dates I don't have. I can tell you right where I was at, but I got no freaking idea when it was.
I always remember.
Know what grade I was
like
in.
That. Yeah, but I always remember those kind of things. the important times in my life. Let's see. That part was coming up. I just thought about that, the 4 month, and then there was something else in between that period I was going to tell you about too. The changes. I drew a blank.
Were you thinking about some of the cool stuff that happened to you?
Yeah, all that. Thank you. There you go. That's exactly what it was. Right around that 4 month period was when one day I was driving down the road, and my wife, we were doing really good at that time, and I wanted to go get her some flowers, and I was like, well, she won't want me to spend the money right now, on flowers, and plus they die. She always said, well, it's a waste of money. They die. So no more than I thought that. There's a bouquet of flowers in the middle of the road. And I literally stop in the middle of 42, a busy road, and get out and get these flowers. I get back in my truck, and I'm driving along. Not only is it a bouquet of flowers, it's a bouquet of artificial flowers, that won't die, and they're perfect shape. And I drove straight to my wife's work and gave them to her. And, dude, I was laughing like a madman the whole way. I was like, I can't believe this shit, Look what God just gave me, I started seeing those signs, and the signs I see every day now, that I was blind before.
That's part of that awakening, that awareness that we get along with this is that our eyes are open
of these steps.
Right, eyes are open to be able to see things, and it's one of the huge gifts of that I was taught that Christopher has a particular gift for, is to be able to see stuff for what it really is, rather than us trying to like discount. I've got this thing in my life when stuff happens, I've always wanted to like discount it, instead of actually weighing it for what it's really worth. And
see what it is. Yeah, everything happens for a reason.
We have that little running joke thing where he says, "You know what that is, don't you?" Whenever something's going on, back when I didn't know what it was, and he would say, "You know what that is, don't you?" And I would try to make some kind of spiritual significance out of it or something, and he'd say, stop. The correct answer when your sponsor asks you that question is, no, I don't. Why don't you tell me? And so now today we can do that a lot, and we don't even have to really even explain anymore, because we just say, "You know what that is, don't you?" And we just smile. And having that awakening thing is certainly part of the miracle and the promises.
For sure.
So I also know that you write some poetry.
Yeah, and that happened around the same time too. It was probably that was about a month after I finished the 12 steps. I got it written in a book. I got the dates and everything, times when this stuff happens to me. But I'd started doing meditation, and I'd never meditated before in my life up until that point, and I started doing it. And one night I was laying in bed, and I couldn't sleep, and it was 12:30 at night, and I started meditating, and all of a sudden, the word reliance, it looked like it was written on a chalkboard.
Yeah.
I was like, what is that? And I say something said go right, but I mean, I didn't actually hear a voice say go right. It's like, I can't explain that, and I was like, what? Go right. And so I jumped out of bed, and I ran downstairs and grabbed my notebook, and I just banged out this poem. And I start crying. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Where'd that come from? Because I'd never read poetry before in my life. I never wrote poetry. I didn't like to read at the time. Nothing, I was like, what is this, So it started happening frequently after that, and I'd never meditated to make it happen or try to make it happen. When it happened, the only way I can describe it is like words just fall in my head. And I just have to get it on paper as quick as I can before it's gone. And I for the first year, I kept this notebook on me, like 24/7 pretty much. I'd carry it everywhere with me just in case it happened, so I could write it down, And like I said, it happened during meditation, but I started doing like driving meditation and walking meditations and stuff like that, trying all kinds of different meditations. And it would happen when I was driving. I had to pull off the side of the road and write it out real quick. And that one was a really cool one. I'm gonna tell that one. I was on my way to a meeting one day, and all of a sudden these words just start, like I said, falling in my head, and I'm like, what? So I pull out the side I wrote, and I wrote out this poem real quick, and I put a title on top of it. It was titled Swamped, and so I go on and I get to this meeting. I take my notebook in with me, and I sit down to this table, and it was a step study, and so they have all these books all over the table, and you sit down at a random chair, random book, and they said, open up to such and such page. It was step 4. Well, I had not done a proper step 4 yet at that time, and I was at step 4 and 5. And it was messing with me because I hadn't got rid of all that stuff yet. And
still carrying some things.
Still carrying a lot of things. And like I said, I didn't do a very thorough one the first time around. So I opened it up, and on the top of that page, my name is written in my handwriting in the top of that page. I'm like,
really?
What the hell? So I took a picture of it. The next page, the top line, the word swamped is right there. I was like, well, that's a sign to read this poem in here today. So I did. And it goes like this. Laying stagnant in the swamps of despair, where I wallowed in the muck of pride, self-pity, and fear, the sunlight of spirit flows through me. You know what? We're going to have to edit that one. Because, I just messed that up. As we rain from... Yeah, I'm all messed up now. I'm all flustered, got stage fright or something.
That's interesting.
But laying stagnant in the swamps of despair, where I wallowed in the muck of pride, self-pity, and fear, the sunlight of spirit evaporates me. As I rain from the ground up, I now realize I'm no longer bottom of the barrel, but of top shelf self. Floating on pink clouds, I rain down through cloud 9, where the sunlight of spirit flows through me, casting rainbows of hope for all to see. That one.
Very cool, man.
Thank you,
man. Yeah, there won't be no edit needed.
Yeah.
We don't deal in perfection anymore.
Yeah, it's progress, not perfection, man.
That's a lot to remember, man. And I know you've memorized some things that but that's.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes, and especially if you haven't said that one in a while, and because I've gotten a lot of people that ask me to say them and things like that, or and I try to remember them now, but there's so many of them now, it's like
right.
I can't remember half of them, but
to retain them all in memory would be pretty difficult, no doubt.
Yeah. So I read that one in there because of everything that happened. I mean, there was so many God shots, and then I read that and told them the story of how that just happened on the way here, and my name's in the top of this book, and the title's on the next. What is this? Yeah. It's my higher power. It was just really cool how he was showing me all these signs and what things were. It's really cool stuff. And I enjoy writing the poetry and stuff, and it doesn't happen as often now. But to me, they're deeper, more meaningful now. But like I said, they don't happen very often. The poetry thing is something that I'm kind of looking into a little bit. I think
you certainly should continue to develop that. And as I said, I was actually, and I don't know how to. I messed this up when I want to say it, but I'll just try to speak as freely as I can. First time you did it, I actually cringed a little bit because I thought, oh man. And I really one thing I was impressed that you actually had the wherewithal to do that in front of everybody, because that takes a lot of guts to lay yourself out in that vulnerability of saying, okay, here's some of my work, and I'm gonna sit here and tell you all it,
Yeah.
And I was a little bit, I was afraid of a bombing kind of thing for you,
Right.
I felt for you. I was like, oh man, please don't let that. But it's also cool stuff that that obviously was alleviated immediately, and you can see the impact that you make when you do get an opportunity to read one, and what the feedback from the folks that get to hear it and stuff. So obviously I'm hoping you're keeping all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I got full notebooks.
We got another friend that's been writing a little bit of stuff, and even though it's been posts on our little group chat thing, some of it's poetic enough and from the heart enough. I was like, you need to keep that stuff in the notebook, do something, save it in Word documents, do something to keep that, man, because I think you got a gift there that's developing, and maybe it's going to be a, I don't know. I had a vision thing, and our sponsor does that too, and I'm like, hold on,
what's this?
But I'm like, hey, I could see this like turning into like with you a book of poetry kind of stuff where you got these
Right.
poems and things. I could see this guy having this book of like essays.
Right.
Just essays from the heart kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not necessarily a book of like a continuous thing.
Right.
But yeah, man, everybody's got these gifts, and they get polished up and start shining in recovery. It's one of the things you see. It's a common trait you see with everybody, and I've said that too. Sponsors taught me that, and I started identifying it, that guys that have a certain, again, I don't know what other word to use than a certain level of recovery. A level. I don't really know what kind of real word to put on it.
There's always more, though.
But it's people. Yeah, there's always more. But you see these ones that's got this certain shine.
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed, and it was pointed out to me by my sponsor, I see it today, that awareness thing we were talking about, is they have some kind of creative art in their life, be it writing or my woodworking or Darren's painting.
Right.
Christopher's writing, other people, got a buddy who's a cook. I think that's a creative art,
sure.
It's no doubt, so you see these things where these people have developed these, and that creative edge seems to be one of the parts of it, you can be good at what you do. That's one thing, but it seems that there's a creative edge to some things that seems to be required. I'm not sure how to, haven't fully developed that theory completely.
Right.
But I do have a feeling. I do have a thing that says that people need to have something creative to do, that they are not dependent on anybody else.
Yeah.
To help them do. So if you need help doing it, you kind of screwed in a way, because when that person or them other people ain't around.
Right.
And then, like, I imagine at some level when you're sitting doing that kind of stuff, you say you do it meditating, but there's a meditative property to these things, that people who paint or write, or I know I feel that way when I'm doing woodwork, when I disappear out here and time just disappears on me. You're in that zone, that flow.
Yeah, and you get that moment. It's a cool moment. I just had an experience not too long ago. I was at Gethsemane Monastery with a sponsee. We went out there the day before my home group went out there to take a meeting out there, and we dropped his fifth step out there in 6 and 7, and actually the writer Thomas Merton is buried there.
Right, Bardstown, Kentucky,
Bardstown,
Gethsemane, the Abbey of Gethsemane.
Yeah, Abbey of Gethsemane, and that day after that, I was in my room meditating, and I was about 2 hours in. And I had a really cool meditation, and it was like waves coming up on a beach with words, but they were written in Sanskrit. And the words weren't in the sand; they were like floating on top of the water and just like staying on top of the sand. It was really cool, and I was like, I guess that's a sign to write. So I went over and sat down at my table and just wrote out a page of just thoughts, and like it wasn't like poetry or anything like that, but it was just thoughts of a higher power and things like that. And it was a really cool experience too, man. But like I said, it gets deeper and different every time I do it, and I'm looking forward to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too, man.
Well, I think that's about all I got for tonight, man.
Well, we had a really good talk. I thought it was your story just blows me away. The depth and the courage that was available to you, and we know that power comes from someplace else, but that is, I always hear that thing, you said a few things of where, you knew some things, but you didn't really, right? It looking in the rearview mirror. That's a typical thing. We sit here and you wake up again and you see that, how that happened. At the time, you don't got clue, right? You're freaking clueless.
Right.
But down the road, it becomes,
very clear.
So then, that's also that tool where whenever that same kind of stuff happens and you're a new guy, you can point that out to him today, because you go, that don't discount that dude.
Yep.
And because he just wants to just move right on by it, and we can help our guys grow through that too, because that helps that whole coming to believe thing, that this thing is really operating in your life. That's like step 2 forever, is to continue to see this stuff happening and know it and believe it. And you said, in other words, really important to me is that reliance, because that's what we're doing here. We're trying to learn to rely on this power that's available to us. My prayers always say that I want to deepen my relationship with my higher power.
Yep.
But more than that, really, I want to deepen that reliance, on it. So yeah, we've had a good talk. We've got a good piece of content here, man. I'm looking forward to continuing these podcasts. We will have,
Me too.
We do have a domain name that is spiritualunderground.org. exactly how it's spelled. I know it's a lot of letters, but it's Spiritual Underground. That is our home group and what this podcast is named after. And then we have that domain. We have show notes on there. You can look up pictures of us so that you can kind of put a face with a name on that. And also the links to the podcast there. All podcasts are on all the major things now. That wasn't the case up until now. This will be the first time I can actually announce that on the air here. Yeah, so it's on your Apple and your Google Play and all the different. I think there's 6 or so of the main podcasting outlets. Obviously, the ones on the Android phones and iPhones are the 2 big ones. But that is juice, and the things we're getting to do and spread this thing.
Yeah.
I continue to be amazed.
Yeah.
Continue to be amazed. And we got bigger news coming down the pike too. I don't want too much. Can't really let the cat out of the bag on that too much. But we'll flirt with it a little bit and tease you. So maybe you'll keep on listening to this podcast too, and it will be talked about there. It's going to be more to come. So I really appreciate you to death, man. Love you to death.
Love you,
like I said, man, it's like I really got that. I have a visual, of like the wrist cutting blood brother kind of thing,
yeah. For sure, me too.
Of actually doing the battle together and having the same tools and some different. We obviously have the same sponsor too, so that's where we're sponsee brothers for real in that regard too. So there's certainly something to all that, and we kind of end on a couple of notes. Man, I have the best home group in the entire world, and if you don't think yours is, you need to go find yours.
Yep.
I have the best sponsor in the universe. And if you don't think yours is, you need to go find yours because they're out there for you. You are your only limitation.
So true.
Cool, man. Appreciate it, Shane. We'll be back on the air again. Shane's been on these before. He'll be on them again.
We'll see you next time.
Good night.